Welcome to Psychology Today. I'm your host, Ann Morrow. This is a show about bicycling, and specifically about bicycle safety. I want to thank our crew for helping us in the control booth, and we're actually going to drag somebody out of the control booth and be one of our guests. Clayton will be with us a little bit later. He knows a lot about bicycles, and he's going to help us understand how to maintain our bikes and change a flat tire. And our first guest is Shelly Spence, who's representing the People's Coast Classic, what we call a charity ride that benefits the Arthritis Foundation. And she'll tell us about their charity ride in September and how those kinds of rides work. Thank you for joining us, and I want to thank our guests for being with us and taking the time out of their busy schedules to talk to us about some of these cycling activities. Many of us will be doing some sort of a charity ride this summer. We might do Reach the Beach. That's a popular one here in the Portland area. It benefits the American Lung Association. Maybe we'll do Bike MS, and that's a weekend-long ride that raises money for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. So that's kind of what we're talking about here with the People's Coast Classic and a charity ride. And this particular one actually is a week-long ride, but you can opt for fewer days. So let's meet our first guest, Shelly Spence, here representing the People's Coast Classic. And thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first to get started?
Well, I live in Vancouver, Washington, and I work for the Area Agency on Aging and Disability as a case manager. And I am originally from a small town in Eastern Oregon, but moved over to the west side of the mountains to go to college and just fell in love with the area, and I've remained here to make this my home.
Well, good. Glad to have you over here.
Thanks.
Are you a cyclist?
Yes, about 7 years ago, I wanted to try to find an activity where I could make new friends, and so I decided to buy a bike and started just riding around in my neighborhood, started commuting, and just found that I really enjoyed it, and started signing up for different organized rides and going out on longer rides on my own, and I just love it.
Well, good. Well, I like to hear that kind of a story. So what's your favorite ride right now?
I like any opportunity that I can get out on my bike, but my favorite organized ride would be the People's Coast Classic with the Arthritis Foundation.
That's a real loved ride for you then.
Yes, definitely.
So this time of year, I bet it's nice to reflect back on those memories about last September and the ride you did, isn't it? As you look into a new summer of riding, you kind of reflect back on what you did the year before. At least I do.
Yeah, definitely. And we're starting to gear up for next year's ride as well. And so we have like monthly newsletters going out to riders and things like that. So the excitement's already building for this year's ride.
So how did you come to be involved with this organization?
Well, when I was 14, I was diagnosed with arthritis, and at that time, I didn't really understand or know that children got arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought it was an old person's disease. So, I felt lost, I felt alone, I really didn't understand how to process what was going on. And so when I went to college, I started volunteering with the Arthritis Foundation just to learn more about the disease, and through the years, I've just gotten more and more involved in the foundation and its different programs that it has to offer.
And so, consequently then, how did you get involved with the People's Coast Classic?
Well, in 2011, I was asked to be the honoree of the ride,
Mm-hmm.
and of course I was excited to do that because I love cycling and I love to share my story about arthritis, and so my husband and I both rode in 2011, had such a great time. We came back in 2012 as volunteers.
Okay, and so Ty Lee, who is the development manager of the Arthritis Foundation, the Great West region, he told me, and you just identified yourself as an honoree. What does that designation mean?
Well, an honoree is somebody whose life has somehow been impacted by arthritis. Either themselves or a loved one has arthritis, and that person becomes kind of the face of the ride and provides inspiration to riders and our sponsors, and really shows how what we're doing can make a difference in somebody's life.
So that honoree, that really isn't an honor.
It definitely is,
it's
yeah.
like being the rodeo queen or something.
Exactly.
So many organizations do put on charity rides, as I kind of talked about at the outset. What does, when you say charity ride, I'm using that terminology, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think charity rides and the People's Coast Classic event gives the foundation, the Arthritis Foundation, a platform and a venue to share our story and raise awareness and raise the funds that are needed to create change and hopefully someday find a cure for this disease.
And two, I think to raise money for the organization, ideally, again, there's a lot of these types of rides, but raising money for the foundation, we'll get into that a little bit later, maybe about fundraising. So you were an honoree, and then last year you were a SAG driver, I understand.
Yeah.
So exactly what is a SAG driver?
So a SAG driver is somebody who patrols the course and assists any cyclists who are in need.
And did you SAG anyone? I'd like have to pick up anybody and give them a ride?
Yeah, definitely. We had the course is pretty hilly out there, you know, just along the course, and we had some riders that were concerned about some of the hills and wanted to conserve their energy so they could really enjoy the rest of the ride. So the SAG team kind of helped those riders up the hills. We also carry additional water and snacks for cyclists. We carry, you know, mechanical supplies so we can help a cyclist change a tire quickly. We carry floor pumps so they don't have to use their small road pumps, so they can get back riding a little bit quicker.
So it's a lot of fun then to be helping people accomplish the ride.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's so much fun, and the energy on the ride and all the riders and the SAG crew, you're constantly talking to each other and encouraging other, and it's just a lot of fun.
It sounds like it. So describe the route for us. You said there were some hills and things. It's along the Oregon coast. It's the People's Coast Classic, so it is on the coast.
Yes, it's along the coast. We start in Astoria, right on the Washington-Oregon border, and follow the Oregon Department of Transportation coastal route. The route is about 370 miles. We average about 70 miles a day. We have one challenging 84-mile day, followed by a kind of a shorter rest day of a 23-mile day. And September is just a beautiful time of year to be on the Oregon coast. It's generally the driest, and we go the week after Labor Day, so it's a time when the traffic is at its minimum.
You're right. I think a lot of great riding happens after Labor Day because it's still summer here and a lot of the road traffic is gone. So that sounds like a good plan. Now you mentioned challenges of hills on the route. Are there any other challenges you can think of along the route?
No, I think, you know, just the hills. We take, outside of Tillamook, we take the Three Cape Scenic Route through Pacific City. So we go, you know, over those three large capes. And then we also have a section of the course called the Seven Devils. And you could imagine what the Seven Devils are as well. They're seven hills. And so that's, you know, they're challenging hills, but it's a beautiful ride, and sometimes there's a surprise on top of a hill waiting for you. So,
okay. Well, we won't spoil any surprises. What do you think was the best day of riding?
You know, that's a really difficult question because each day is so unique. But my favorite day was probably day 5 between North Bend and Arizona Beach. And I like that day because you go through Bandons, you kind of go through the Bandon Dunes, you go through some like cranberry farms. There's lots of unique art galleries and small communities that you can explore. And the views along the coast are very dramatic. There's lots of big cliffs and the water is bright blue, and it's beautiful.
I think riding along the Oregon coast is a lot of cyclists' dream to somehow do that, and so this can make it happen for you. Now, is the route the same? You just kind of do the same route every year?
Yeah, it's the same route every year. The Oregon Department of Transportation's bike route down the Oregon coast is what we follow.
Okay. And what advice would you give a prospective rider for getting ready for training for such a long ride, a week-long bicycle ride?
I would just say getting out on your bike as much as possible. You know, all week rides are always usually on open roads, so if you're not used to riding on open roads or in groups, maybe signing up for shorter distances of group rides, organized rides, just to kind of get acclimatized to kind of feel that out, see if you're comfortable in that situation.
Well, that sounds like good advice. So do you need to be a super athlete to do this ride?
No, you don't have to be a super athlete, but definitely you'll enjoy the ride more if you do train some for it.
Uh-huh. So some hill climbing obviously should be in your training program.
Some hill climbing, definitely add that to the training program.
Or can you say sag? And you'll get the
Oh yeah,
the sag
wave your
right.
hand and we'll come running, no worries.
So a charity ride usually involves raising money for the charity. That's the idea. Perhaps a person pays some money to do the ride, like any event ride, and then perhaps also raises money for the charity. How do riders typically get donations?
There's a variety of different ways. One of the best ways is just sharing the mission of the Arthritis Foundation, sharing the reason why you chose the Arthritis Foundation to do a benefit for how has arthritis affected your life, sharing that to your friends and family and asking for a donation. Some riders may do like happy hours or poker nights in their home to raise the funds, just small events. And the Arthritis Foundation really provides riders with a lot of support and tools that they need to meet their fundraising goals.
Huh, that's interesting. It's nice to have some, having not done something like that before, it's good to have a little help.
Yeah, definitely. It's really helpful. They have like this whole toolkit, and you can raise line online, and it's connected to Facebook and all of those social media outlets. So it's
really high tech.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to go to a quick word from our sponsor, Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, and look at the Beaverton Banks and Beyond Bicycle Tour. And registration for the 2013 bicycle tour is now open. So let's watch this video. Well, there you go. That's a view of the Beaverton Banks and Beyond Bicycle Tour put on August 24th, as you saw. And registration is now open. You can go to our website and link on to the registration forms. And we've got a great jersey this year as well that I think you'll want to pre-order for riding for years to come. It's really classy. Now, the Beaverton Banks and Beyond ride can be a training ride for something like the People's Coast Classic, a mini goal for you to see assess your fitness as you're getting ready for a big ride a little later in the year. Or our ride can be the goal itself for your summer. Maybe you want to do a century. That's a 100-mile ride. As a cyclist, a lot of us want to set that goal for ourselves. And the Beaverton Banks and Beyond Bicycle Tour is a great one to make that your century ride for 2013. So whatever the reason, it's just a great ride and a lot of fun. You don't really need to have it be a reason. You just get out there and have some fun. I hope you'll join us. I'll be out there. Usually I run SAG, as our guest Shelly did for the People's Coast Classic. So I know what that's all about. And that's the great thing about event rides, is that you have somebody to pick you up off the side of the road if you're having a bad day. So let's get back with Shelly Spence. We're talking about the People's Coast Classic, a charity ride that benefits the Arthritis Foundation. And we're just talking about the ride itself. That will be this September. So you can go to their website too and get information. And I think there's a good video there that really gives you an overview of what Shelly is talking about. You can actually see some of the sites on their website, I think. So Ty Lee tells me that he's a cyclist himself. So he knows that cyclists need to eat well and that he feeds, you are fed well on this ride. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, definitely. You are fed very well, and even averaging 70 miles a day, a cyclist could probably gain weight on the ride.
That's always a fear.
Yeah.
After wearing the stretchy Lycra all week,
Exactly.
you won't fit into
You're
your
almost
jeans.
constantly eating.
So let's talk about a typical day on the road. I'm trying to encourage people to do a ride like this, and you mentioned it can be a little intimidating. Let's talk about a typical day on the road. How do you wake up in the morning?
Yeah, well, the People's Coast Classic really offers a lot of options for cyclists. The ride provides camping and a shower truck for all riders, but some people choose to stay in a hotel, and that's fine. And the SAG crew will transport luggage and stuff like that for you, so you can ride to and from your hotels to lunch and breakfast. And generally, we start our day with a hot breakfast, and cyclists can roll out of camp at their own leisure. We have kind of like an hour and a half time frame. Everybody needs to be out of camp. I think it's about 9 o'clock. Some cyclists love to just, get out on the road and just ride as hard and fast as they can to the next checkpoint. Other people really enjoy taking their time and going to different galleries and coffee shops and different places. One of my favorite things that I did when I was a rider is I took a lot of detours to lighthouses and just other tourist destinations and lookouts and stuff like that, and added some miles to the ride. But I definitely enjoyed that, kind of getting off of the beaten path, and it really provides a cyclist with those type of opportunities. We have one official checkpoint on the ride has a big rest stop with food and drinks, and we also offer some mini stops along the way with small snacks and water. A lot of cyclists like to stop for lunch as well along the way. Local brew pubs are generally a favorite among cyclists. And every evening after dinner, when we get into camp, we usually have an evening program where we review how the day was, what to expect the next day, and we also take a time for a mission moment. And at that time, the Arthritis Foundation makes a short presentation about what they're doing to help people with arthritis. We may have the honoree speak and share their story one night. We may talk about our kids camp that we have for children and families who live with arthritis, just to kind of give the riders an idea of why they're working so hard. Why are we out riding the Oregon coast? We're out there to ride and have fun, but we're also out there for something bigger. We're out there to make a difference.
Interesting. Now, when you say checkpoint, do your riders actually check in? Are you kind of keeping track of them so you know everybody's gotten at least that far?
Yeah, definitely. With this size of ride and long ride like that, we like to make sure we're accounting for every rider and making sure that they're safe. And so there's generally like 3 or 4 SAG vehicles along the course. So the SAG vehicles are also communicating with each other of where different groups are, so we can position ourselves to better assist a cyclist if they are in need. Or we might radio in and say that this group is in the bottom of the hill waiting for a SAG driver, and then I could radio in and say, oh, I'm almost there, I'll pick them up.
I see. Pretty high tech.
Yeah.
Now, I understand perhaps on this ride you're on your own then for lunch. You just do whatever you want, or don't eat lunch and just use the rest stops?
Exactly, yeah. Like when I rode on the ride, there were times that I didn't stop for lunch. Or you can, we always have a pretty big breakfast. So a lot of people sometimes would just make a sandwich at breakfast time and take that with them along the ride, and then just supplement food at the rest stops and the mini stops as well.
Sure. And a lot of people do the tent camping. So they bring their tent, set it up, high school football fields or campgrounds, or where do you typically stay?
Yeah, it's a variety of places. We stay in a baseball field and a football field. We have a campground. Arizona Beach is a campground. It has great access to the beach, and we even had elk roaming our campsite one night at Arizona Beach. So yeah, it's kind of a variety of different places of where we camp.
Okay. And you mentioned that you took the time to explore the coast. A great benefit of being a bicyclist is that you can take little detours and really get a better look than maybe you would in a car. Did you find a lot of other riders were doing that as well?
Yeah, definitely. When I was first invited to do this ride, I was like, oh, I've driven the Oregon coast, I've been on it, but being a cyclist on the Oregon coast just opened my eyes to a whole new world, really. to really experience the Oregon coast, you got to do it on a bike. I mean, it's just amazing, and there's so many small, unique galleries and shops and brew pubs and ice cream places to try out that are often just passed by on a car.
Yeah, yeah, they are. And you have the luxury of being able to eat the ice cream if you want, because you're burning up the calories. When you're in the car, you kind of have to.
That's right. That's right.
So, as an honoree at one point of the Arthritis Foundation, how do you see yourself as benefiting from a ride like this?
You know, the biggest way that I think that I benefit is the research programs that the Arthritis Foundation sponsors. When I first started my journey with arthritis, I took 22 prescription medications, and I still struggled to walk. I struggled to tie my shoe. My parents brushed my hair, carried me up the stairs. And today, thanks to research and development, I take one biological medication in form of an injection once a week, and many people would be surprised to know that I have arthritis. And that's, you know, thanks to the Arthritis Foundation and sponsoring research programs has really changed my life.
Boy, no kidding. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
Boy, what an improvement for your quality of life.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know where I would be without that medication. So
Probably
I'm
not on a bicycle.
Not on a bicycle. No. So I'm very, very thankful for that.
Yeah. About how many people did the ride this past year?
In 2012, we had 68 riders, and it was the third year of the event. Our first year, we had 38 riders, and then the next year, it was about 54. So the event is growing.
It takes time to get the word out.
Yeah.
So, and that's for sure. So I hope this helps. Now, as a SAG driver, you're part of the safety team. So many riders that you're responsible for, really. You invited them out on this ride. You know, there's just a lot of safety concerns on a situation like that. How were the riders kept safe, do you think?
Well, each day, the part of the SAG crew would drive the route the day before the riders came through, and they would mark the course with chevrons. They would also note any hazards like potholes, narrow shoulders, construction detours, anything like that. And during our evening program, that's all reviewed with cyclists so that they can be aware and know what they're getting into before getting out on the ride. And then riders are given detailed course maps with all those notes on it as well. And the event organizers also put signs out on the roadway alerting motorists that there is a cycling event going on. There's one section of the ride just outside of North Bend. There's a long bridge that has a very narrow shoulder, and there's a lot of strong crosswinds. And the event generally doesn't promote riders to cross that bridge. So the SAG team will ferry riders across that small section. It's about a mile long bridge or something. Some riders in the past have walked their bikes across, but then the next year they've taken the SAG vehicle. So
it's just not a pleasant part of the ride.
I know, it's really not that much fun. And it's kind of fun just to all pile up into a vehicle as well. It's kind of a team building experience.
Yeah, camaraderie.
Yeah.
Well, in some of these rides, I rode every single mile, and this one, you got that little bit of a ride. So as a SAG driver, how did you feel personally as part of that safety team? What role did you play?
You know, it's just stopped and helped cyclists. I think that I made a lot of cyclists ride more enjoyable because they were able to kind of hit the funner parts of the route and the more scenic parts of the route. There's not a lot of cell phone service in some areas of the ride, and so each SAG vehicle, we do have satellite phones, and so that was helpful for riders that needed, you know, we have a mechanic that's on staff, and we could call to the mechanic so he could come and help us if it was something more than a flat tire, or that, you know, that maybe we couldn't fix and needed additional assistance. We had those satellite phones to get a hold of people.
Good. That, again, the SAG vehicle really does add to the safety element.
Yeah, and sometimes people think the SAG vehicle is there, you know, for when you get tired and need a ride, and it's more than that. You know, we have water, we have snacks, we have extra tubes, we have Vaseline, like whatever you need, we have that in our vehicle, so we can help you and have a better day, really.
Well, and I know I've carried a broom because you sweep the glass off the road if you come upon it, so to help make sure they don't get a flat tire.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that you visited a lot of little communities, and there's art galleries and things like that. Um, did you find these little towns hospitable? Did you enjoy visiting these little coastal
Yeah,
communities?
definitely. All the small towns are so welcoming for our event and our riders, and some of the business paint their windows that say, "Welcome People's Coast
Oh.
Classic." Some restaurants will also even set out tables and water for our riders and offer lunch specials for our riders. And just really supportive and really fun, and really get into the event as well when we go through town.
Sometimes that can be a nice way to meet new people too. It's just you get into their little town and you just find yourself having a cup of coffee or something with somebody.
Exactly, and it gives us an opportunity to share our story as well,
Uh-huh.
and get our mission of the Arthritis Foundation out there to various people. We during the ride we have a road show that comes with us, and it's an educational program that we take with us to some of the smaller communities and we invite the locals to come and learn more about arthritis, and we may have a physical therapist coming and speaking about arthritis, and it's just a good way to educate people about arthritis.
It sounds like it. I've been educated here tonight.
Okay.
So as kind of a closing, what would you say to someone watching that's kind of a novice cyclist and thinking about doing something? How would you encourage them to take this plunge?
I would just say, start off slow. If you're not sure, you want to dive into a 6-day ride, we also offer a 2-day and a 3-day option. And just start doing more organized rides and working up to the longer rides, and you'll love it.
It sounds like it. You make it sound like a lot of fun. I'm sure it is.
Yes, it's definitely a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Shelly, for joining us and telling us about the People's Coast Classic. I knew a little bit about it. I know a lot more now.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So remember that, we're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll have Casey Clayton here to talk to us about changing a flat tire and bike maintenance, just in case you don't have a permanent SAG driver following you on your rides. And it's time for our monthly safety video. And then we'll be back for the second half of the show in just a few minutes. So remember to bike safe and bike smart.
Bike safe, bike smart. Hi, my name is Xander.
And my name's Elizabeth.
Over the next few minutes, we're gonna have some fun and talk about some pretty important stuff.
Some of it you've heard before, but it never hurts to hear it again.
And again.
And again. So here we go. Did you know that just falling off your bike is enough to get a serious brain injury? So play it safe. Wear your helmet every time you ride. It can reduce the risk of head injury by up to 85%.
And that's a lot. The helmet should be snug on your head and sit flat. The strap should form a V under your ear, and the chin strap should also be snug. 2 fingers should fit in between your eyebrow and your helmet.
Also, make sure your helmet meets safety standards. Look for a sticker that says CPSC. This stands for the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
All the stuff we talked about today is common sense.
But you still need to think. Be courteous and be predictable by always riding in a straight line.
Wear a helmet. And follow the rules of the road. Ride with traffic on the right side of the road. Ride single file.
Obey traffic lights and traffic signs. Check behind you before turning. Use proper hand signals.
Stop, look left, right, then left again before entering a street. And use caution at an intersection.
Make eye contact with other drivers. Be careful around parked cars and watch for objects in your path.
And at night, be seen to be safe.
Never assume that motorists or pedestrians will see you. Remember, Bikes are smaller than cars, and if there's a crash between the two, any guesses who will win?
That's all the time we have. So remember these 4 words. Bike safe, bike smart.
Well, that's certainly a good video about safety. And although it's children spreading the message, it's a message for adults as well. And if you'd like to see that video again, our shows are archived on our website, and so you could double back and watch that video again, or have your kids watch it, or your parents watch it to get that information again. And certainly it's something that Northwest Bicycle Safety Council would encourage you to do. We want you to be safe. And so speaking of safety, our next guest is Clayton, and he's going to talk to us about bike safety in the form of your bike, because it's not just your body and the helmet on the head, it's also the bike itself that can collapse on you if you don't take care of it, and you'll have a bad accident. So thanks for joining us, Casey.
Thanks for having me, Ann.
We usually have Casey back in the back in our booth doing the audio, and he's agreed to come out and talk to us about important stuff here. And we managed to get him out here. And Casey, you work for Riders and Sliders?
I don't work for them. I happen to be a very, very good friend of the
Okay,
owners.
okay.
And I try to push his services as much as I possibly can.
Okay. And you know a lot about bike maintenance, though.
Yes, I've spent about 30 years in the biking world, actually about almost 40 years in the sporting goods industry,
Okay.
and about 30 years with bicycles. And of course my tech brain has taken me to analyze and think about most everything that goes along with a bike or sporting goods equipment.
You and I happened to do a bike ride this last Sunday, and we were with somebody that was having challenges with his machine.
Correct.
And you were analyzing what the problem was. That was kind of interesting. What kind of riding do you enjoy?
I prefer off-road, basically because you really only have to deal with squirrels and maybe a branch or two, versus the four-wheel vehicles and so forth. But lately I've been finding that I haven't been able to get enough riding in, so I did purchase a new bicycle, and I've been finding myself getting out on the road.
Hoping to mix it up a little bit then?
Yes, put in a few more miles.
Good. Well, I hope to ride with you again. That was a lot of
Yes,
fun.
it was a lot of fun. We need a heater though.
Yes.
It was awfully cold.
It was cold. It's still winter. Let's talk about taking care of our bikes, because again, if you don't take care of it, you're likely to have an accident and get hurt.
Correct.
So let's start with fixing a flat tire.
Okay.
So often a tire goes flat on the road, and what do we need to bring with us, and how do we go about this?
Extra tubes is a good thing, and more than one. Okay, because depending on whether you're only riding 15, 20 miles, but the idea is if you go more than a mile away from your starting point, you want to be able to get back. Walking is not the easiest way to do that.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend at least 2 tubes. Okay, patch kits. I prefer the self-glued ones versus the glue-it-yourself ones, because generally, if you get lucky, you don't have to use it, and unfortunately when you do have to use it, the glue tends to dry out and you're not going to be able to use it.
That's right.
So the pre-glued ones I find are capable of sitting in the bag for a long period of time and still are usable, so it's a good thing.
Okay.
Tire irons. Can't pull the tire off a rim without tire irons. And a set of 3 of them is very cheap. It's about $8 or $9, and well worth it. What you want to do is basically there's 2 parts of the tire iron. It's the part that actually goes underneath the tire itself, and then you have a little curved part over here. This is to give you basically a third hand. It allows you to be able to hook this onto a spoke,
right,
and let go of it. So what you want to do is to pick a spoke that's on the same side as you're working on, hook this underneath the tire, and then hook it to a spoke so that you can let go of it. That holds the tire outside the rim of and then you take your second tire iron, stick it underneath, and leverage your way around. Now they come in sets of 3, so in case the bead of the tire is so tight that you actually have to work your way a little bit farther than that. Generally not, you get to the second point of the second one, and then all you have to do is just slide it all the way around, and the tire will come off. Okay. I don't think I'm going to pull this off completely for time sakes. But then what you're going to do is just take the tire off completely, pull the tube out. If you have a portable bike pump or a floor pump with you want to pump it up, overinflate it to try to find where the hole is coming out, and then of course put your patch on it. If it's easy enough to just replace it with the tube, just go ahead and do that. Big thing you really want to watch out for is just putting a new tube into a tire that you haven't actually taken a look at and found the penetrant.
What is the cause of the flat tire?
What is the cause of the flat tire? If that penetrant is still stuck in the tire carcass and you put a new tube in there, it will cause another flat. And then, you know, whether you have enough patches or another tube and so forth. So I generally carry a rag with me so that I don't cut myself. And I'll run that rag along the inside of the tire carcass, and once that rag snags on whatever's penetrant, then you know you found it. If you don't have the rag, then you're going to basically cut yourself. So be very cautious about that.
When you're bleeding, you found it.
Yes.
That's not a good,
it's not
a good way.
It's really dirty anyway, and then if you start getting blood all over, it's a different story. There are different types of flats. We talked about the penetrant flat. One of the bigger ones is lack of inflation. And if you hit something like a hole or a railroad crossing or something like that, that will also cause the tire to deflate, and you'll pinch the tube between whatever you hit and the rim. And that's usually always on the inside of the tube and will always look like a snake bite. So you'll have two holes that are identically right next to each other.
And people refer to it as that kind of a flat.
Correct.
It's a snake bite
flat or a pinch flat. And that's, again, the problem with riding with less pressure than what's recommended. Every tire also has recommendations that's on the side of it, so follow it. Okay, before you go riding or during the ride, make sure that you're up to inflation.
So typically, I'm a weekend rider. I probably need to inflate my tires each weekend as I go to my rides.
You need to make sure you check it.
At least check it.
Correct. At least check it. One of the things that people don't understand is that rubber is porous, and it will lose air. It's just one of those things that happens. Okay, and then you run into situations like that. Now, one of the other situations that we talked about on our ride on Sunday was valve stem rips.
Yes.
And that's another cause from tube slippage inside the tire, and the valve stem getting caught on the valve stem hole inside the rim and pulling the tire away from it. That's another inflation issue.
Okay.
Okay. So those are primarily the biggest flats that you have. A penetrant.
Yeah.
Most everybody's going to run across something that's going to penetrate the tire, and then riding underinflated.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it. The only other thing that I might recommend, and this happens to deal with the general maintenance, is to try to take some talcum powder when you have the time at home and you're doing some primary maintenance. And that talcum powder will coat the tube and the tire and allow for some movement inside there. Not only allow for a little bit more give in the tube when something does penetrate, because it's not stuck to the tire. Okay, and it will also increase performance because the tire will actually have the ability to actually mold into the turn.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there are some benefits to that. So that's a simple thing. Is just take some baby powder, spread it in the tire, run it around a little bit, put the tube back into it, and inflate it.
Okay.
It's real simple. Plus on the maintenance side, and plus on the performance side.
And that's always a plus.
It's always a plus. Now, the only other thing that I would highly recommend is when you go back to putting this back together is try to work the tire back on the rim by hand. Okay. Some beads are tight enough where you can't do that, but the more you work it on by hand, the less chance that you will do self-inflicted damage by pinching the tube.
Yes.
And that's just another one that makes it more frustrating. You're there spending more time putting putting another patch on, or putting another tube in, and not riding.
Yeah.
So, and that's the tire.
Now, you've got this is your teeny tiny little
That's
pump?
my teeny tiny little pump that I carry with me on the road, and this is the floor pump. I do also normally carry another device that I thought was in this toolkit, but it's not, and that's a CO2 cartridge.
Okay, tell us about those. A lot of people love those.
CO2 cartridges are fun to have, basically because it does tend to eliminate 90% of the inflation. But even that, or the little teeny tiny pump, is we'll never get the tire back up to where it's supposed to be, and that's where the floor pump comes in. Now, you can't carry one of those with you on your trip, but at least you'll be able to get enough air into the tire to be able to get to the next stop or to the next spot to be able to change it. Another thing that's, I highly recommend carrying with you is an adapter, especially for roadies that ride with Presta valves. And this allows you to be able to adapt the Presta valve to a compressor fitting, so that you can use that to fill it up. So if you run across the gas station, then you can get more air.
You can get the right tire pressure.
Correct, and I didn't happen to bring one of those with me today.
Okay,
but,
all right. So you're saying that the CO2 cartridges are great to get you started, but you should also carry a regular hand pump.
Correct.
Because I think the problem I understand is if you have a really bad day and you really haven't taken care of things.
Yeah, CO2 cartridge is only good for one inflation.
Yeah, and you're done.
And you don't want to be burdened with the added weight of carrying a half a dozen bottles.
I guess not. So plan it all carefully and think worst case scenario.
Exactly.
Let's talk about, we talked about the different punctures and the different types of flat tires, and you really covered those well. Another thing that I think of as something that punctures the tire is those little teeny wires, I think, that come out of like radial tires. So that's another little teeny tiny thing to look for.
Wherever they come from, you will tend to find them.
But like you say, just like glass, you'll feel that.
Correct.
But if you don't get it out, it's going to go through the next tube too. And so, let's see, sorry, I'm getting a little lost here. So taking care of our bikes, let's talk about the tire chain. I think we kind of covered the tire changing. A chain on the bike makes the bike move.
Correct,
and
that's your heartbeat.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, yes, you are on the bike and you're the actual motor, but if you don't have a chain that's going to direct your energy from the pedals to the rear wheel, it's not going to go.
So about how long does a tire chain last? Or not the bike chain?
Boy, that's $1 million question.
Oh, okay.
I have seen chains wear out within a few miles, and I've seen chains go for 5,000 miles. But when thinking that a chain is only as good as long as until it breaks, is wrong theory.
Yeah.
Is wrong theory. A chain stretches. You have, let's see, about 112 links normally in the length of a chain, and that means you have about 200 and some plates and about 150 pins. And so it's all moving parts inside there. And the more you climb, the more you power sprint, you're putting more stretch on that chain, and the quicker it's going to wear out. Now, that's just in general use. Now, if you talk about adverse conditions like rain and dirt and so forth like that, then you're adding more variables to having this chain wear out more prematurely. Generally speaking, you're looking, if you measure from the first or A pin to the fourth pin, you're looking at about 2 inches. So if you took a normal ruler and put it up to that point, anything more than 2 inches actually I should say about 2¼ inches, then the chain is what's called technically worn out, and it's highly suggested to change it. Now they do also have little measuring devices that you can get that will take the real guesswork out of it, and they're fairly reasonable cost-wise. You can get them pretty much, well, you can get them at Riders and Sliders, and you can get them at pretty much any of your neighborhood stores, and you know, have them in your toolkit and check the chain every once in a while. But really what happens is as those links stretch, the chain does not like to move laterally. It will actually bend. So when the derailleur tends to want to say, you know, move from one cog to the next, it doesn't do it. And that's where you get your hesitation in performance. Where you get your wear aspect is that those pins will stretch and they don't match with the little U-shaped things in either the cog on the rear gear or the chain rings that are in the front gear. And that will, as well as the pulleys in your derailleur. So all where that chain meets, you're going to have premature wear.
So it not only it's broken, but it's ruining other parts.
So, you know, I recommend that if someone changes a chain somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,500 to 2,000 miles.
Okay.
Okay. But if you have the bike on a stand or next to a workbench to where you can measure it and keep an eye on it, it may be earlier than that to do that. It's much easier to, well, chains are pretty expensive anyway. I mean, they're running anywhere from about $10 all the way up to several $100s, depending on what bicycle and what Grupo components you have on the bike. And if it's several $100s, you're going to, you know, you have in a Grupo drivetrain, you need to replace the chain because there could be several $1,000s worth of, you know, other parts that are being torn apart at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that's motivation.
That's motivation. So it's not only dollar-wise, but it's also performance-wise too. So you perform better by having a new chain on.
Yeah. Yeah, because that hesitation in your shifting
Correct.
is just really ruins your momentum or stops you on a hill or something like that.
And or, you know, heaven forbid you get to the point where the chain actually does break.
Yeah.
And then you'll go over the bars.
Yes. Yes. And you're not moving.
Correct.
That's, boy, okay. Well, that's good information because I think it's something we forget and take for granted.
Oh, of course. And we think it will last forever.
Yeah, it's metal.
Even tires, they think they last forever.
Yeah. And we'll get back to that. Now, I've seen some newer bikes that have, instead of having the metal chains that we're used to, are belts, literal belts like you might see in a car.
Yeah.
What's with that?
It's just a different engineering trait. It still works the same, but you'll usually have a different mechanical gear changing device on it, so that you can get multiple speeds. But they wear out, and they wear just as much as, you know, they're not going to wear adjacent components as much as a metal chain will.
Yeah.
But they'll wear out and break just as well as a metal chain will.
Okay. And do you see that replacing chains in general, or not necessarily? I mean, in the future.
Well, when we support BB&B, this is the last year, I think we replaced 8 or 9 chains on the ride.
Oh.
You know, people got to the point where they were coming to us complaining that things were not working, and it ended up being the chain. And every ride that we support, usually as chains are the most needed part, other than brakes. You know, we've had wheels break where we've had to replace spokes and things like that, but chains generally tend to be the biggest issue.
Boy, and that's something you really don't want to deal with when you're on a big ride.
Try not to.
Yeah, that would be better to do it somewhere else. Let's talk about tires. And probably could have talked about this when you were changing the tire, but they come in various prices and styles and things too. I know some people get new tires for their bike and say they spent more for their bike tires than they did for their car tires.
Exactly.
What is your philosophy on tires? Do you look for quality or low price, or what are you looking for?
Well, again, that's another $1 million question. Is because we have to meet budgets.
Yeah.
You know, people spend a fair amount of money in their bikes as it is, and you know, to replace parts. They'll generally lengthen the useful life of the part to begin with to get it to the next spot. There are tires out there that have special casings to them to help prevent penetrance. There are fold-ups. You have glue-ons. It all depends on the type of riding you're doing, whether you're doing track riding or whether you're doing, multiple day events like the coast. I probably would want to find something that would make sure that I got from point A to point B. But whether it's Michelin or whether it's Schwalbe or what, it's up to the individual pretty much as far as what they want to put on there.
Would it be a fair statement that certainly you're looking for quality, and a good quality bicycle tire is going to help prevent puncture flats?
Yes and no. Nothing that man has made is not capable of breaking.
That's true.
Even the tires that actually have the materials in them to help stop penetrance, I've seen penetrated. So it's not whether it's going to be a complete fix, but it helps eliminate that.
Yeah.
But some tires that have aramid beads versus the steel bead are going to roll a little bit nicer. So, but again, you're going to be spending more money for it. So the individual has to take into account of how much they can spend for the ride quality that they have.
And I've heard that buying a big beefy tire then impacts your ride.
Correct. Now, as far as roadies go, you have everything from an 18 millimeter all the way up to, I think it's 28 millimeters.
Wow.
And the wider the tire, you're going to have more surface area on the road, which is then going to increase drag and so forth. So you'll have to overcome it. That's why some of the super riders will ride somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 23 millimeters, and so they'll have good surface area for cornering, but yet not the big surface area for flat out speed when they want to really put a sprint in.
So it's just not that easy. You really have to give a lot of consideration to yourself and your own riding.
And that's why shops like Riders and Sliders are there, so that you can come in and we know the questions to ask, so that we can put you towards 4 or 5 different tires from different manufacturers and put in front of you, and then you can weigh the tread design, if you're talking off-road, tread design versus slick for on-road, and what ride qualities versus the wherewithal in the tire.
Well, good information. Now, would it be accurate statement to say that your bicycle should not be making noise
Correct.
while you ride?
Correct.
What kinds of things are making noise that
Bad things.
Okay.
If they're
Clunking
making noise, then that shouldn't be there. The ride should be very quiet, and if you're starting to make noise, then it's time to start seeing somebody to ask why this is making noise and where it's coming from. Some of the basics are the hubs, are the bearing sets. First, you would have in the front wheel, you have a bearing set. The back wheel, you have a bearing set. In the pedals, you have a bearing set, and in the headset, you have a bearing set.
Okay.
Most noises come from that part. Is an easy way of checking those things while you're doing it is to grab a hold of the wheel at the 12 o'clock position and the handlebars. Move the wheel laterally. If you can move some wheel laterally, it's time to get it fixed.
Oh, okay.
Time to get it checked. Rear wheel's the same way. Pedals, grab the crank arms at the 6 and the 12 o'clock position and see if you can move it laterally. If you can, not a good thing.
Okay.
And then the headset is put the bicycle on the ground, lock the front brake, and if you can rattle it back and forth and you actually get some moving or clunking, then that's time to take a look at it as well. But in general, noise is not a good thing. And it should be investigated further. If you can do it, fine. If not, bring it in to your respected mechanic and say, I got something.
Yeah, yes. Would it be accurate to say that if you buy a good, decent bike, a good frame, And if you take good care of it, it can last,
Yes.
barring unforeseen circumstance, virtually forever.
Yes. I've got some steeds hanging from the garage that are probably anywhere from 25 to 40 years old.
Uh-huh.
And they're as good as the day that we first put wheels on the ground. So, and it's just like your car. I mean, if you don't put oil in it every 3,000 miles or change the tires, when it's needed, then you're going to find yourself alongside the road and not being able to enjoy, what you're out there for.
So that's a good analogy. Most of us have a car and we try to maintain them, and a lot of times our bicycle is, a pretty big asset in our lives as
Yes.
far as the expense of it. So it's certainly something we want to maintain, but the safety element, that you don't want to be on a road and
Agreed.
just falling to pieces.
Agreed.
And how are you going to get home?
Yeah, and that's a big thing. If you're gone for more than a mile away from where you start, it's a long way back.
You're pretty much sunk. Call mommy.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, thank you, Casey, for joining us and giving us some information. There's a lot of bike maintenance information to go over,
Yeah.
but I think you gave us some good basics to give us some consideration about maintaining our bikes for the safety element of it, and just to keep an expensive bike in your life for a long time. Bruce and I are going to be trying to run our Banks for Breakfast ride soon, so watch our schedule and join us for that ride. There's a lot of great rides coming up to get you ready for Beaverton Banks and Beyond Bicycle Tour on August 24th, and the registration for that ride is open. Please go to our website and sign up for the ride and order the jersey, because it's a beauty. And so we've got, a lot of us are going to be doing Monster Cookie in Salem in late April, and we've got the Pioneer Century put on by Portland Wheelman on June 1st. And then Beaverton Banks and Beyond on August 24th. So there's a lot of great riding. Please join Bruce and I. We offer a lot of different rides for newer riders, slower rides, group rides, to get you started and get you out there and riding your bicycle. It's good to ride with other people. You can learn a lot. People like Casey, I rode with him Sunday and learned a lot from him. So it's a great way to go. Please join us. Thanks for joining us on Psychology Today.